Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hello everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast, the show where great dentistry meets great business. My guest today has a wonderful and rich background. He's a dental practice owner, he's sold businesses, bought businesses, he's moved into the education space, he's an entrepreneur, his businesses have been listed in the BIW Fast 100 magazine. Dr. John Hagiliassis is here to talk to us today about what fast growth really means and the lessons that he's learned. It's a wide-ranging interview, and in this interview, John talks about his background, the influences that have shaped him, the people who have been impactful in his life, and he talks about how to create a business with a 6-star service and how to scale that and how to create growth as well as a fantastic brand, a patient experience that absolutely rocks, and to be able to do that while maintaining, a great relationship with life and family and all the things outside of practice. John, of course, is very well known these days as the founder of AORTA, which is the Aesthetic, Orthodontic and Restorative Training Academy. And you can find out more about them at aortaaustralia.com.au. But as I said, in this conversation, John shares very openly, very freely. There's tons of pearls of wisdom that he shares here that are really applicable to day-to-day practice. And if you take some notes and apply them, I can assure you you're going to get some tremendous outcomes in your practice. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. Here's John. John, welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your Friday afternoon, mate, to come and hang with us. How's things?
Very good, mate. Pleasure to be here with you.
Oh, mate, it's been a while coming. I'm glad we got here. So, mate, there's lots of things I want to talk to you about today because your background is really, really interesting. It's quite diverse. You've obviously practiced clinically. You've run a fantastic business. You've won lots of awards. You're doing a lot of work with AORTA and ACAS. But I want to kind of go back in time right to the beginning and get a bit of an understanding around your background, your upbringing, and what drove you to business, what drove you to become so influential in that space. And I'm curious to understand why people do the things they do. So I'm just wondering if you can share with me a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. Look, I've come from a blue-collar background. My father was a fitter and turner. My mother was a receptionist for Medicare, head office, public school upbringing. I actually got into commerce science at Melbourne Uni and was trying to get into optometry. And I sort of hedged my bets and went into commerce just in case. But as it turned out, I was applying all over Australia to get into the School of Optometry and happened to put dentistry second at UQ.
Oh, wow.
And then in January, I got this letter, said I was in. And within a week, I said, why not? Let's give it a go. And I was up at UQ in 95 for the whole year. And it changed my life. It was a great year. Great bunch of academics and colleagues that I'm still friends with ever since. And I remember doing problem-based learning with Prof. Aldrin at the time, who was pioneering, the problem-based learning concepts.
Yep.
And he, funny enough, came back to Melbourne, and I did really well, got back into Melbourne in 96, where home was,
yep,
and graduated in 98. So I sort of did it by commerce science, second year UQ, and then a couple of years at Melbourne, and I was ready to go. But dentistry was never in my concept. It was just filling in second place for optometry. I had an auntie who was an academic and a lecturer at Melbourne Uni in optometry, pediatric optometry, and I knew I wanted to be in the healthcare profession. And optometry, I thought, was the path that my mentor led me to. But dentistry happened, and like I said, that moment in Prof. Aldred's session in problem-based learning defined this is what I want to do. It was cool. I could problem solve. I could interact. And as I got into dentistry and came back to Melbourne Uni, there was a realization that UQ was, progressive, a place to learn. Melbourne was stuck in the 1950s. And it was a reality check of, this is not the way dentistry should be taught, should be done. We forget who we're treating as patients. It's not doctor knows best. And that really took me on a journey that I don't like doing. Don't like being told what to do. If I find a better way of doing it, I will do it. And that's my journey over the last 20 years as a dentist. So I was hungry to transform the profession, bring that 6-star customer service to the dental game, and that transparency. We're on the patient's level rather than talking down to the patient, and that's taking me one hell of a journey. So I bought into a private practice in 2002 after working for one of my mentors, was a prosthodontist by a guy named Igor Chernovin, who was the head of the ADA Vic Defence Committee, and that was a fantastic experience. He employed me before I graduated. Spent a couple of years with him, I guess, learning my craft, and then bought into a practice in 2002, bought the associate out in 2007, and I've been on this amazing journey where we became BIW's fastest 100 businesses, over 6 years of 35 to 40% growth in one practice. So we went from 2 chairs to 4 chairs to 8 chairs in a period of time. And it was just evolving this patient's wants versus needs philosophy.
Yeah.
Where we focus on the patient. It's the patient-centric practice rather than the dentist-centric practice.
Well, mate, you've given me a lot of threads there that I'd like to unravel. It's like a jumper. I've got a number of threads I can pull on and see where we go. I do want to go back in time, though, because we're talking off air about your background being Cypriot and having grandparents who migrated to Australia. I'm always curious to ask about migrant upbringings, because I think, in my experience anyway, I noticed that there's a lot of drive to succeed, a lot of hunger, a lot of appetite to get ahead and do well. I want to ask you, who's been the most influential person that created that obvious drive that's in you? Is it innate in you, or was it observation, or was there some sort of family? What happened around the family dinner table?
I think it's an interesting one. I think the journey of a migrant is one that fascinated me, because I agree with you. I see it from many aspects, but I think there is this search for identity.
Yeah.
When you come to another country, my father came here when he was 16. My mother was born here, but her parents came in 1950 to Australia. There's this innate loss of identity. You're not quite Australian, but you go over there and you're called Skippy, or you're called the Aussie.
Yeah.
So you're stuck in this thing of not being certain who you are. And I think it drives, I guess, that first generation migrant children to prove themselves.
Yeah.
You see it a lot with some amazing things. You look at the likes of Apple, Steve Jobs.
Yep.
It's that almost like, I don't fit in, so I need to go that extra mile. And it drives innovation. It drives success. We see it all over the world. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. You see something innate, but it wasn't driven or forced by my parents. I definitely had an innate drive. There's no question about that. But I think being the son of a migrant, or being that first or second generation, it drives you to want a better life.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So you started off in your first practice, and as you said, it became a Fast 100, BIW Fast 100 business for several years. I want to ask, what defines fast growth? There's got to be some sort of parameters in place. Yeah,
it was my accountant saw the BIW article, right, and saw our figures and said, let's just for a laugh enter it. So it was done by an accounting audit. The accountant submitted it, but we were growing revenue at an average of minimum 5 years. You had to show growth over 5 years, and we were growing at 40% in the one practice.
Nice.
And that wasn't doing aligners or scanners. It was just this philosophy that we had that grew and grew this one practice, and kept buying suites as we expanded our vision and our brand. And we were getting patients not just from locality, but based on reputation from all over Australia. It wasn't just Melbourne.
Yeah.
So that was the parameter. So it was just this acknowledgement of growth. And we were with such amazing startup companies in tech. We were, I think, one of 2 healthcare providers that made the 100 2 years in a row. It was 2011, 2012. So we were growing despite the global recession at the time, the GFC, at 35 to 40%.
Well, interestingly, in my notes here, I've made a note that those 2 years were post-GFC, or just around the GFC. And, of course, we're recording this in coronavirus time.
Yes.
So I'm curious to explore where you see the similarities and where you see the differences between that global financial crisis and where coronavirus is, because clearly there's upheaval in both circumstances, and we can talk about, the nuances and differences. But I'm also very much of the view that where there's upheaval and uncertainty, there's opportunity as well. So you've obviously been able to capitalize on that opportunity from 2011 and 12. So let me first ask you, how do you see the GFC as it relates to coronavirus? Do you see it similar? Do you see it differently? Where do you see the parallels? Where do you see the differences?
Yeah, great question. And I definitely see a lot of parallels. Look, the GFC was an interesting time because I had just bought out my associate. He was in his 70s and he was retiring, and then all of a sudden had these 2 chairs on my own. And it was, and had my firstborn just born in that same year, 2007. And then, the stock market started to slide and crash, and there was all this uncertainty. But it further galvanized us in our view. We were finally free to be who we wanted to be as a practice rather than having to negotiate. It's like those that have been an associate know it's like being married.
Yeah.
And it can often not end well. But we moved on, we expanded, we had the vision of what we wanted to do. Then necessity is a mother of invention. We necessitated, we created the growth. We knew what we wanted our patients to feel, and we saw opportunities in whitening at the time. When Rudd formulated the $500 cash benefit, we were growing in-chair whitening 60, 70 cases a month in a 2-chair, which then went to 4 chairs based on Rudd's cash bonus. It drove our business, and it was focusing on what patients wanted. So we innovated our workflow to ensure that if a patient was calling on the phone wanting whitening, we weren't going through what everyone else does. No, you need to come in for check-up and clean. The patient wants whitening, you accommodate and you structure it in a way that they come in. If they then can't do it, you then educate them face-to-face rather than diagnosing or telling the patient what they need rather than listening to what they want. And that drove exponential growth in our practice. Before we even got really into scanners and aligners, we were growing our practice on aesthetic dentistry, but dentistry based on what the patient's wants were rather than telling them. So that to me is the similarity now, is because Smile Direct Club's entered it, and it's the biggest boost we've ever had to our profession. We've got companies spending $5 million a week promoting what we do better. So it's no different. So that workflow that we evolved then is no different than what Smile Direct Club is doing.
See, I really like your I love your reframe on that, mate. So what I really love about what you've said there, because I know that there's a lot of dentists who are hand-wringing about Smile Direct Club and going, this is terrible. But it's not. See, I'm of the same view as you. They're paying their money to educate the market. And amen, let them continue to do that.
Absolutely.
And so I really just wanted to highlight that point. So if you're listening to this podcast right now, I'd really like you to go back and just listen to what John said, because I think if you can frame these things very well, you'll see the opportunity, whereas others see heartache. And there's opportunity there if you just look for it.
Certainly, it is a huge opportunity. It's like it was, in the GFC time. People would go to a dentist and the dentist would say, "I know whitening doesn't work. Oh, the take-home whitening doesn't work." Patients don't want to be filled like they've been talked down to like a child. That they want their teeth whiter. Find a solution. Don't tell them that their decisions are wrong.
Yeah.
Clear aligners are no different. People want a straighter. We live in the age of the selfie. They want wider, straighter teeth. If you don't deliver it, someone will, and they'll do it online without having to leave their couch. Right? Now, whether it works or not is a separate matter, right? We see the same similarities in optometry. Optometry, you can buy contact lenses anywhere in the world.
Yep.
Right? For a couple of bucks. Now, people go blind on these. Has the government tried to stop it or legislate against it? Of course not. It's a free market. Clear aligners, we can talk all we like about it causing perio. It shouldn't be done. The reality is there's a demand for patients at that price point to enhance their aesthetics. And we need to show how we can do it better.
Yeah.
Rather than telling the patient no.
Yeah.
And that's that innovation now that I see was whitening, 12 years ago, is now in the clear aligner space, which is for me the norm anyway.
Yeah. And I think what we were talking about off air as well is one of the things that's come out of coronavirus is that it has forced innovation that may otherwise have taken longer to develop. And so I know that you love technology. I know that you're at the leading edge of that. You're an early adopter. Where do you see technology playing a role for dentistry moving forward? I know that's a big, broad question, but
I love it. Look, I'm not someone who's a tech head. I just surround myself with people who are good at, better at me than technology. But I see technology as being a tool to better service the patient experience. That's my what I've enjoyed over the last 20 years is saying, how can I use this technology to better service the patient? So with the scanner, to me, it's a no-brainer. Patients don't have to gag. You've got this data that you can use and replicate and draw on at any time virtually. You can simulate smile enhancements. You can track it. I mean, the future of dentistry is embedded with technology, and then you add in AI to that. It's an untapped potential. What I foresee the future being is that patients come in for a recall every 6 months. They get scanned by a nurse, by a therapist. That's a separate argument. Who does it? That data gets collected and collated and superimposed with the last 6 months.
Yep.
It's an app. It's like the smartphone, right? It's not the smartphone. It's the app. It's the software that has transformed our lives. In dentistry, the scanner is the conduit for the next phase of this software to completely transform our diagnosing and treatment planning process, because the software will give us a report radiographically. It's already happening in AI. Radiologists are redundant.
Yep.
Now, if we're not careful, we'll become redundant in many aspects, but we have that point of difference in that dentistry from a multidisciplinary point of view can be brought together by a general dentist, and technology harnesses that potential.
It's really interesting you talk about that, because I'm aware I've got a friend and colleague who's actually working on apps that do exactly that right now. So I don't think we're too far away from that. I don't think it's a 10-year thing or even a 5-year thing. I think it's a 2 to 3 year thing.
It already exists. There's no question.
Yeah.
It's just how does it get commercialized?
Yeah, exactly. I think the commercialization is only a couple of years away. That's just my opinion, and that's just an opinion. Mate, I wanted to just go back to what we were talking about a moment ago, which was around, growth, because growth does drive innovation. Growth can create, growing pains. And there'll be lots of people here listening to the podcast who say, wow, John, 30-40% year on year for 5 years is pretty phenomenal, and hats off to you, mate. That is great. But I want to ask, firstly, you alluded to what drove that growth, but I'm also curious to understand, what did you learn from being on that ride? Because that's like having a tiger by the tail and holding on, right? So what did you learn?
Look, I learned your biggest asset is your people, and you treat them well, and they'll deliver in spades. I learned that you never take for granted your patients. It's an honor and a privilege to give them the opportunity to say, look in my mouth. For us, we should be humbled by that right rather than taking it for granted. I think that's been really the journey, because the growth, we didn't take anything for granted. We didn't keep putting our prices up. In fact, we looked at ways of making sure we were more competitive as we grew. Our money didn't go up because our prices went up. It was a contrary. We used technology to better service our patients and keep the costs down and be more efficient. So the patient experience was always forefront in our journey. And when you take it for granted, you'll get found out.
Yeah, totally.
I think those two, your people and your patients, never to take for granted.
Did you find at any point that your leadership needed to evolve in that process?
Oh, yeah, no question. It is hard to be the clinician working in it and then trying to work on it, right? And that was always the challenge. And also to have people around you that have the same value and love of what drives you as a leader. So I think you find throughout the journey that you need to really communicate your why, what your passion is, what your vision is. Because if you haven't got buy-in from your team, I can tell you over 15, 20 years, you get these skirmishes within your internal network. The alpha male tries to rise to take over. It's just human nature, right?
Yeah, totally.
And that was a lesson in, you can never keep everyone happy in the team, but you just got to make sure. I always use this euphemism of the freedom train, and we did it once in a meeting. Yeah, it was about 40 staff, and we had issues. So I got them to walk in the morning meeting, in the morning huddle, in a circle, big circle, and said, "Welcome to the freedom train. One of you turn left, one of you turn right, and what happens?" And it really, we still talk about and joke about it, but I was at my wit's end that day, and I needed to try and get 40 people to understand, by working together, we're better. So it's always been a learning curve, and I think I've evolved as a leader, and I think the biggest thing was not realizing that your team may not have the same passion, and trying to get the best out of them for their situation, as well as the team situation, is that fine line that you want to try and galvanize the team to that point.
Yeah, nice. In that journey, John, I'm assuming obviously you had lots of successes, and we learn a lot from success, but we earn a lot from, stuff ups and failures. Any notable boo-boos or mistakes along the way?
Always, and you always got to make sure you learn from them. I think recruitment plays a role.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to hang on because it's better the devil you know. You tell yourself.
Yeah.
It's easy to keep going. And then, like a cancer, it can spread. So knowing that is your fault, your responsibility, and learning from it quickly and being brave enough to make those tough decisions and timing that better is, I guess, something that has learned me over the time. Why did we hang on? Why did we take so long to make a decision?
Yeah.
Because you always give people I always give people the benefit of the doubt and look for the best in them. But sometimes it's easier to ignore what's in front of you.
Yeah. And have you learned that your intuition is spot on? Do you have a process that you go through as you make these decisions, or do you tune into your intuition a bit more now?
Yeah, you do. But what I've learned early on too, in terms of recruitment, that I outsource it.
Yeah, okay.
The moment I get involved in a clinician's interview, I've found my intuition is to go opposite to what I think.
Okay.
And use the people around me to look at it from the patient's perspective rather than my perspective. Just because my success drives a dental practice, often contrast is preferred than the same.
Yeah, okay, nice.
I need 8 of me. We need 1 of me and 7 other unique individuals.
Yeah,
from a clinician's point of view, and I think that harmony is been a secret to our success clinically, is having a team that respects each other's strengths and weaknesses and works as a team rather than individual surgeries under one roof.
Yeah, nice. So, in the last few years, you've become known for AORTA, which is obviously the aesthetic and orthodontic restorative training academy. Well regarded, well respected. I'm curious to ask, what was the rationale for you to pivot into that space?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. I was presenting for Ivoclar and Smile Styler and Bupa, who I sold to, and they were asking, share your journey. And it wasn't until I shared my journey to clinicians across the Eastern Seaboard, they weren't asking which aligner system. They weren't asking, how did you do it? And then I really wanted to help and provide, once you had a chance to retrospective, because when you're in that wheel, when you're in the hamster, when you're running down, until you stop and reflect and assess and analyze what was successful, what didn't work, I started to realize it's not about the aligner system. It's not about a scanner. It's about a philosophy. And I'm passionate. And I had, my associate, Dr. George Abdulmalik, a great academic at La Trobe Uni, who had worked for me part-time and said, you really need to share this because it is unique and it is a mindset that's going to help others. And it's been probably one of the most amazing things I've ever done in my career, because I'm helping make a difference to clinicians. I'm not here professing that I'm going to teach you orthodontics, but I'm going to teach you workflows and systems to help you see within your practice what's possible and what the future holds, and help hold their hand in that process. And it's been quite amazing where you see practices that we've taken on board that quadruple their aligner numbers, and they're just growing and they're happy and they're confident in the way they're approaching that new aspect of dentistry. Because as far as I'm concerned, if you're not doing sleep dentistry or sleep apnea dentistry and implants and clear aligners, you're going to find it hard to grow.
I agree.
It's what we do, and you need to implement that. And that's what I've been excited about with AORTA.
Yeah, which is fantastic, and it's a really well regarded program and platform. So I wanted to just ask you about the sale of your practice. I've sold a practice, I've bought practices, sold practices like you. How did you find selling the practice after you'd gone through that journey of growing it, developing, fast growth, BIW 100, all that stuff? How did you feel about relinquishing ownership?
Yeah, it was a strange time. We were actually looking at going national with our brand and our concepts. And I got a financial advisor in and I said, look, that's the plan, that's the vision. And then it was a different mindset and said, well, hang on. Maybe look at what's else if you partnered with someone else. So he brought in Maven and dental 1,300 Smiles. We had about 5 suitors. So it was an interesting journey because my mindset wasn't that I was selling and stopping or moving on. I just wanted to partner up and outsource what I'd done and try and continue that journey. And it did. It gave me the opportunity to reflect, and sort of AORTA sort of happened as an afterthought after that period. So it was an interesting journey because I didn't see myself giving up control. It was almost like I had reached what I could do and I was happy with what I had done.
Yeah.
It was now looking for that next chapter.
Yeah.
And what did that look like? Rather than buying and selling from a purest business point of view, because from that point of view, I didn't do it. My drive wasn't to make money. My drive was to build a brand, build a way of doing dentistry that I could go to work and feel happy with what I did. So it wasn't this savvy business decision. It was with the heart and with him. And I just turned 40 and I thought, you know what? Go big or go home or partner up. And that was the decision that was made.
Yeah, nice.
Best thing I ever did.
Yeah, fantastic. So it sounds like, when you've, sold to Bupa, and, this is what I've spoken to a few people as well, is it is, in the very best sense, a partnership in the sense that you're allowed to continue to do what you want to do. They take off some of the back office admin and you can continue to just free yourself up to do other things. And I was interviewing one of the former acquisition officers for Maven, and she was saying to me that, that's the very best kind of acquisition from the corporate perspective, as well as that genuine partnership. And I think if you can get that right, it obviously is very fruitful for all parties. I wanted to ask you, though, running AORTA, different kind of business, very different to a dental practice. Yeah. What have you learned about that? Because your business and my business have some similarities in that regard, and it's very different to dental practice.
It is. Look, I think it really reiterates that it's people game.
Yeah.
It's totally. Like a dental practice, it's to another level.
Yes. And
hats off to me, to Dr. George Abdulmalik, who is an educator and passionate about education, because often the secret to AORTA's success has been his ability to communicate and break something down to educate. I'm passionate about what we do and how to grow businesses and how to help clinicians, but I think the education part has been a real challenge. It's all well and good to say it, but how do you ensure it can be followed through and produce results that are long-lasting, a legacy, a mindset change, right?
Yeah.
How do you change someone's why and get them to see a different mindset? That's the challenge.
Yeah. So as you've gone through this transition, from running the dental practice, obviously you're still in the dental practice, but now running AORTA and ACAS, what I'm curious to ask you around that is, beyond the people and beyond that, what new skills have you had to develop? What sort of innovation have you had to think through? What other challenges have you had to overcome? Because I know that there's people listening to this podcast who might be interested in doing similar things or different things, or having a venture outside of their practice, or doing something beyond the dental practice. What skill sets do you think have been transferable? Obviously the communication piece, but beyond those, what have been transferable, and what are the new skill sets you had to develop on that journey?
Good question. I think like with any business, you need to have a vision, you need to have a purpose, you need to make sure the systems in place. I think the organizational aspect of it is important. I think that the challenge has been understanding new technology, like the online platforms and the education platforms, and recording like this, and being able to ensure that you're communicating to your new audience. It's the similarities are the same though. Your customer is the most important thing. Yep. Without a customer, you haven't got a need business, or a want for a business to survive, right? So the difference has been, the difficulty has been actually is, I think I get the patient's perspective pretty well, and I've understood that and successfully. But the dentist mindset, when you've done dentistry a certain way to a high level, and then trying to help someone else who has different objectives or goals and trying to align them, has been the challenge. So it's communication, but it's trying to realign myself and understand that my customer now is not that dentist patients. It's that dentist or therapist or dental practice, and how do I give them what they want? Yeah. And deliver a service that they feel like they're adding value to themselves professionally and hopefully personally as well. Yeah. So that's been hard. So it's really digesting a lot more in the education platform and how to communicate and understand different mechanisms of education to be able to transfer a message and an image and a vision of what they can do to help their dental practices. So I'm sure, like you, it's not easy to gauge because you can have all the data and the parameters you like, unless there is consensus. You don't want to tell them what to do. No. You want to sort of lead them to water, and hopefully they take what they want.
Yeah,
have a drink.
Yeah,
right.
Happy days. Yeah, that's exactly right. I couldn't have expressed it better. It's an interesting thing because what I've found is that running the two businesses, the dental practice and this business, there's some things that transfer, there's some things that don't transfer, there's new skills to develop, and so for anyone who's listening to this podcast thinking about having a venture outside of business, my personal view is that some of the skills you learn in dentistry are fabulously transferable. Communication, the ability to persuade, the ability to, relate to people. And, all business is human to human. And so, that ability to interact, I think, is really key. I had a conversation on a previous podcast, John, with Brad Wright, the lawyer. And I asked him, what were the skills that he had as a dentist that made him a better barrister and solicitor? And he thought about it, and some of the things he spoke about were exactly that, the communication piece and so on. But the other thing was how to run to time. And I had no idea, just as an example, that solicitors and barristers might be sitting at their desk not being effective with their time. And so all these little things that we pick up as dentists, I think, are really valuable skills. And for anyone listening, I'd say, make good use of those skills in dentistry or even outside if you choose.
Yeah, good one. Time management makes or breaks us, doesn't it? Yeah. And I think it applies in every industry.
Yeah. So, mate, I wanted to just talk a little bit about what's next for you. Obviously, AORTA is a big part of your life. ACAS is a big part of your life. And for anyone interested, if you want to head across to aortaaustralia.com.au, you can find out more about AORTA there. But what I want to ask you is what's on the horizon?
Look, I think at the moment it's really getting through day to day with COVID at the moment in Melbourne for those that are... we're wearing masks. The feeling of a dentist going home and taking their mask off doesn't happen to us at the moment. So I think it's really self-evaluating what we do as clinicians. We're doing a lot more online and innovating in AORTA. AORTA does provide a lab service to its students and doing some virtual smile simulators with post-ortho SDL files. So I'm keeping myself busy in trying to better improve the clinician experience through AORTA. But I'm excited about the future. There's always something on the horizon, but at the moment, I think it's just continuing to tinker with dentistry and the education platform to better provide a service during COVID, and then reassessing, the trends that are going to present themselves in the next few months and the next few years. So it's sort of business as usual. And, the lockdown was a gift. And I'm not expecting another lockdown, but the lockdown was a gift in April and May because it gave a chance for me personally to be able to just take a breath and reassess and look at things from a different perspective. So, looking forward to 2021, looking forward to 2020 being over and moving forward with a new horizon. Yeah,
fantastic. I think there's a few people in that boat, mate. I think 2020 is going to be a year to remember, that's for sure. I don't think any of us are going to, forget 2020, that's for sure. Mate, you've been really generous with your time today, John, and I want to thank you. Your life story is fascinating. It's a rich tapestry of lots of really interesting threads from, having a migrant background, being driven, being motivated, experiencing, rapid success with your practice when you took full ownership of it, to then, selling that to Bupa and then moving into other spaces. I think it's an entrepreneur's journey, and I really appreciate, what you've shared, because there's so many lessons here. And there's so many things that for the listener that they can pick up on and take that lesson and apply for themselves. So I really wanted to say thank you for sharing your expertise, your knowledge, but most importantly, sharing from your heart. And that's really lovely. Thank you, mate.
No, appreciate it. Pleasure, and love what you do, and look forward to meeting in person at some point. So hopefully once the borders open, you'll be happy to touch base with a Victorian.
Oh, I reckon the poor Victorians, aren't they? They're kind of getting
We're the lepers, aren't we?
Yeah, I know. The poor old Victorians. It's like all the Spice Girls memes going around. Yeah, it was all good until Victoria stuffed it up. But we're all, in all seriousness, I think the rest of the country is thinking of Victoria and hoping it gets under control really soon. So thank you, mate, for your time, and we'll catch up shortly.
For sure. Cheers. Pleasure.
Cheers,
Thank
mate.
you.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessegreen.com/savvydentist.